Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Okay, so for this segment we're looking at this poem, The Panic of Growing Older by NECO. Now, this poem simply explains the various stages of life, of the human experience. Let us read just a few lines from this poem. The panic of growing older spreads fluttering wings from year to year. At 20, still by hope of gigantic success, time and exploration. Now, what is the simple background of this poem? The poet has a first-hand knowledge of the different stages of life, as well as the amount of hope in which humans have. Now, at a certain point in time, we grow up from our childhood. Now, normally children do not have much expectations because of their innocence. You know, from 5, 10 years, then they become teenagers, and then adulthood begins to set in, and that is when you find out that this poem actually explains that the older you get, the more you tend to fear responsibility. Now, that is where we look at this word, panic. And panic explains fear of growing older. Now, the poet, the setting of this poem is just actually examining the stages of life. Now, at 20, one is still by hope. Actually, at 20, an average adult is still having hopes that he will become big, he will become somebody influential. And somewhere in between the 30s and the 40s, once that adult is not accomplished, he or she may be marked to be a failure. And that is what the poet itemizes as copybook bisected with red ink. Now let us look at a line by line or a stanza by stanza analysis. Line 1 to 4. As the years roll by, the panic of realizing the purpose of one's existence may spread over the individual. The word panic is appropriate because age comes with trepidation. Remember, as children, we often looked forward to celebrating our birthdays. But with time, we find out that as we get older, responsibilities tend to, make us feel sad, make us feel discouraged, especially when it seems we are not living up to our expectations. Lines 5 to 8. The individual is about 20. There is still much optimism. There is still so much hope of success. It is a period that one has a lot of time for himself. But in line 9 to 12, we see a contrast. The individual has reached about 30 years or so, where there is pain in any part of the body. No laboratory test will reveal it, since the body is still strong and healthy. Now, it may appear as if the individual still has time. Now, watch this. At the age of 30 and after, women will have married with less time for fun. The same is said for boys. By the time marriage and other adult responsibilities set in, people tend to become more serious. People tend to have no time for fun. And if one is not married, if one does not have a good job, if one is not thriving properly, it seems to be a failure in the eyes of the world. Now, this is what the poet explains in lines 17 to 24, lines 25 to 28, 29 to 32. This examines the last stage of the poet's or the person's experience. Inner satisfaction may not have been realized, since it would have been shattered by revolving blades of expectation. We find out that humans tend to criticize when you have not met the expectation. Now, what is the central idea? What are the things examined in this poem? Now, anxiety associated with aging. The more you get old, you tend to worry. Panic having to do with growing old. In other words, the initial excitement in youthfulness does not often last into old age. Now, secondly, man is in a world contest. Find out that you get to a certain age where you tend to compete with the world. You want to drive fast cars. You want to meet up with the expectations of the world. If you are not at a certain level, it is assumed that one is a failure. The twist in human fate, that's another thing. Life is full of expectations. There are so many leaps up and down. In this way, life may be, after all, a movement from activity to docility. That is, at some point, a youth is strong, but after a while, as you age, you become weak. Now, what are the poetic devices used? Now, the poet makes use of alliteration. Now, there are some certain letters that alliterate, that echo. For example, line 4, Y alliterates year to year. Lines 9 to 12, T alliterates 30, pro, tests, to. The poet also makes use of repetition, made reference to hope, made reference to nothing to show the world, a sudden throb of pain. Now we also see that the poet uses personification. Laboratory tests are said to have nothing to show. Science is said to give hope. That is, science is given a human attribute. Now lastly, we look at metaphors used in this poem. Panic, which is compared to fluttering wings. The age of 20 is still by hope. Now we also said that hope is not a grain of sand. Now a question here says, show vividly that the panic of growing older is a pessimistic poem. Now the idea that they actually want you to portray here is to show that the poet's persona is pessimistic. That is, the poet's persona does not expect much. He is afraid of his future. He's trying to show uncertainty of what the future will hold. Now take note that some questions will also be displayed on your screen to determine how much you have learned in this class. Thank you.